Northfield, Massachusetts is a small, out-of-the-way town in the northern part of the state, not far from Vermont. It was the home of the Moody family in the early 1800s. Edwin and Betsy Moody ran a small farm there, and Edwin also worked as a stonemason. The Moody family struggled to survive. They had 7 children, and Betsy was expecting twins when Edwin died at 41 years of age. The twins were born a month after Edwin's death. Betsy was left to support and raise 9 children, which she knew she could not possibly do. Though some of the people of Northfield did what they could to help out, others were only concerned with being paid what they were owed. One debt collector came to the Moody's door, and when Betsy had nothing to pay, he took the firewood that was stacked outside as payment. Firewood, of course, was a staple of the family's survival. Betsy knew that she had to do something quickly, so she sent her children to board with families in the area, who would feed them in exchange for doing chores around the home. Her son Dwight, who was 4 years old when his father died, boarded in a home where he was fed well 3 times a day. When he came home and pleaded for his mom to take him back home, she reassured him that this was necessary and that he was being well taken care of. Then she sent him back to the house where he was boarding. All through these difficult years, Betsy made sure that her children were getting to church at the Unitarian Church in Northfield. When Dwight was 17, he decided to leave Northfield and go live with his uncle in Boston, about 85 miles away. There, Dwight went to work at his uncle's shoe store, where he discovered that he had quite a gift for sales. But more importantly, it was in Boston that Dwight received Christ as his Savior. Not long after he was saved, Dwight moved to Chicago, where he would set out to find success in the shoe business. What he didn't anticipate was that in Chicago, he would become deeply burdened for the plight of multitudes of boys and girls who were orphaned and living on the streets. When he found that these street children weren't welcomed in the established churches, he built a ministry just for them. Eventually, he abandoned his business ambitions and gave his whole life to reaching people for Christ. Dwight Moody once heard a man say, "The world has yet to see what God can do with a man fully consecrated to Him." From then on, his life was guided and driven by the desire to be a man fully consecrated to the Lord. Though he only had a 5th-grade education, he became one of the most powerful and impactful preachers in America's history. He traveled America and Europe, preaching the gospel to great crowds, seeing millions of souls turn to Jesus. Thousands of his sermons are published in book form, and scores of biographies have been written about his life. Over a century later, he is still well known and highly respected by believers around the world. After Dwight Moody lost everything in the Great Chicago Fire of 1871, he moved back to his hometown of Northfield, Massachusetts, to live with his wife and children on a farm he had purchased, which was adjacent to the house where he was born. He made sure his mom, Betsy Moody, was well cared for. After long preaching trips, he would return to his Northfield home to be refreshed. He started schools in Northfield, and he built a 3,000-seat auditorium where he held preaching conferences and invited men of God from all over the world to come and preach to the large crowds that would assemble there. I've been privileged to visit the Moody homestead in Northfield several times. The first time I visited, I drove there by myself in the early 2000s. It's about 2.5 hours from my home. I didn't know anything but the name of the town, so in those days, before I had internet and GPS on my phone, I just followed a map. I had been to other towns that were home to famous Christian historical sites, and I often found that nobody in town knew what I was talking about. So I didn't know what to expect in Northfield. I walked into a random business on the main street, and I asked, "Can you tell me where Dwight Moody's birthplace is?" And with a big smile, the lady stood up from her desk and said, "Moody? Of course," as she pointed me in the right direction. It seemed that everybody in town knew the legacy of Dwight Moody. If you love Christian history, then Moody's birthplace will be a very special place for you to visit. Not only is the house he was born in still standing, but D.L. Moody and his wife Emma are buried just a short walk from his birthplace in a spot called Round Top. On one visit with my dear friend and mentor, Pastor Bob Crichton, I had the honor of going inside the house where Moody was born, and we were given a personal tour. We toured other beautiful buildings on the property, some original and some newer. We spent some time inside the Moody Auditorium, sat in the original seats, and stood on the platform. The guest book is filled with the names of some of the most prominent preachers of the late 19th and early 20th centuries. All of this is set in the beautiful New England hills of northern Massachusetts, along the Connecticut River. When Dwight Moody left home at 17 years old to pursue a better life in Boston, Northfield represented pain, struggle, and poverty. It was the past that he wanted to get away from. But because he was introduced to Jesus Christ and eventually consecrated his life to the Lord's service, he had the opportunity to redefine Northfield as a place of faith and hope and peace. Christian, pursuing God with your whole heart will transform your pain and failure into hope and victory. Stay the course.